got to do this sign now, haven't I?
Maybe not, Julian.
Oh, okay. I shan't then.
The theme of today's show is the past, the future and the present. With regards to the past, well, Julian, something very special happened 35 years ago on the 16th of May, and what was that?
Well, for some reason, the then Master of the Rolls, Lord Denning, decided that he would sign my practising certificate, and I became a solicitor of the Supreme Court.
And in fact, this is the practising certificate in question.
A real live Lord Denning practising certificate. So, to show everybody what one looks like, and that's Lord Denning's signature. There it is. Now,
Julian, you must have witnessed a number of major changes in the law in this country in the past 35 years. Can you tell the viewers what major changes are particularly significant?
when I started, the law was a profession. It wasn't a business. You ran your legal practice effectively as gentlemen did, an old-fashioned view perhaps. You undertook conveyancing and probate. You undertook wills. You undertook various civil litigation and a certain small amount of criminal litigation work. That was the jam on top of the bread and butter which normal legal work provided. Now, of course, it's become a business. The Legal Services Commission, the SRA, the Legal Ombudsman's Office and the Law Society control us all so much that you can hardly breathe without someone looking over your shoulder.
Ever controversial, Julian.
Of course. And we've seen how fit for purpose the SRA is at present because they can't even get their basic administration right. And these are the people who are supervising us. And this is a vast change. But within the actual areas of law I've practiced, primarily criminal law, there have been major changes as well. The right of silence without comment has gone. In other words, inferences can be drawn from silence. If you don't give evidence at a trial, you lose certain protections, which is that effectively no comment could be made. You have to tell the prosecution not only what your defence is, but sometimes what errors they've made in the preparation of their case. In other words, the defence lawyers have to help the prosecution to convict the client. And this is all contrary to the principles with which I was brought up, which I was taught, admittedly starting 40 years ago.
So, Julian, you've mentioned some laws that you don't approve of, but have there been any laws introduced that you feel have benefited this country?
Numerous laws, far too many of them in the last 10, 15 years or so, I hasten to add. But probably the most important is the Police and Criminal Evidence Act 1984, because that meant that somebody who had been taken into custody by the police had the right to have a solicitor, either the duty solicitor or their own solicitor, present to redress the balance between the accused person, who's psychologically at a low ebb in a police station, and of course the police themselves. You redress the balance by having a lawyer present. That was a major change, one which I envisaged in about 1979 when I set up the informal duty solicitor scheme in Stevenage, where I then practiced, and now which is entrenched and indeed treated as a precedent for virtually the whole of the westernised world.
Yes, Julian and I went to Hong Kong last month, and in Hong Kong, although there's a duty lawyer scheme at court, there isn't one at the police station. So, Julian, I think that might be a change that the Hong Kong legal system could adapt.
Well, I think we've already seen in the European Court, in a case involving the state of Turkey, and subsequently in the Supreme Court here, in a case involving the Her Majesty's Advocate in Scotland, that they're accepting that the right to have a lawyer present from the time of arrest onwards within the accusatorial system is one of the fundamental human rights. Let us hope that governments don't decide to save 5p by not paying properly, ending up paying £50 to put right the errors that undoubtedly will result.
Now, turning from changes in the legal system in the past to looking forward, specifically with regards to Hong Kong. In 1997, the British rule in Hong Kong came to an end. Under the Basic Law, the capitalist system and the Hong Kong way of life were to be preserved for the forthcoming 50 years. Julian and I interviewed the one-time Governor of Hong Kong, Sir David Akers-Jones, for his view on what the remaining 40 years in Hong Kong is likely to bring.
This is an interview of Sir David Akers-Jones, former senior administrator in Hong Kong. So David, thank you very much for speaking to Judy and myself. We are the lawyers with attitude. Do you feel that you are more Chinese than English, or have you retained your English character over all the years in Hong Kong?
I think I've retained my English character, yeah, all the essentials of my English character.
And how do you see Hong Kong in, let us say, 40 years' time?
40 years from now.
40 years from now, when the People's Republic of China will finally take over, or so they claim they will take over.
Well, you're asking me to say what will China be like in 40 years' time, because the agreement with China concludes 50 years after 1997. So at the rate that China is changing now, I would expect that China will have some sort of elected government by then, at the rate that it's changing now. But it will have, the elected government will, it won't be it won't be the same sort of elected government that we're used to in Little England, because the elected government of China will have to have a form of elections for 1.3 billion people. So obviously that form of government will be very different from the sort of government we're used to for Little England, as I say.
How do you see the questions, for example, in the immediately foreseeable future of commerce between Hong Kong and the People's Republic of China?
I think the barriers, any barriers that exist, would have been removed long before 40 years from now.
Do you see that happening at present? Are the barriers gradually being removed?
They are gradually being removed, yes.
And does that mean that...
Not gradually, they're being quickly removed, actually.
Does that also mean perhaps that ideas from Hong Kong, the democracy, or the idea of democracy, from, as you called it, Little England, would that permeate through?
I'm using the word little, comparing our sort of 50 to 60 million people with 1.3 billion people. That's why I use the word little. It's little by comparison with England and Britain. But gradually the barriers to trade and business investment and so on are all changing in Hong Kong. But don't forget that we have a common law system in Hong Kong, and that is still being maintained. We have our own currency, but gradually I imagine that the yen, the RMB will become more used in Hong Kong as time goes on. After all, we're linked to the American dollar at the moment, but how long we will be linked, it's difficult to say, but maybe 10 years from now we won't be linked.
So David, you've also been involved, of course, in work within the community. I understand, I think you're on the committee of the Hong Kong Football Club.
Yeah, I'm vice patron. I'm no longer on the committee.
No longer on the committee?
No.
Are you looking forward to the visits of a certain London football team later this year?
Yes, I am, yeah.
Dare I ask, and you needn't answer this question.
I get a ticket.
Oh, I'm sure, Sir David, they will let you have a ticket. Dare I ask which football team you support?
I've heard that it might be Arsenal, but I'm not sure.
Well, indeed, it is Arsenal, because Judy and I are both Arsenal season ticket holders, and we have seen the programme, which has indicated that in July, in their pre-season for next season, they are due to come here. Well, I sincerely hope you'll see that.
Maybe I'll see you there too.
Well, that would be very nice.
So David, you're currently President of the Business and Professionals Federation of Hong Kong. Could you explain the role of that organisation?
Well, after the agreement with Britain, the joint declaration between Britain about with mainland China, the Chinese government, about the future of Hong Kong, known as the Joint Declaration about the Future of Hong Kong, which was in 1984-85. The final signing off was done in the House, by the House of Commons, part of the British Parliament, signed off on the joint agreement. And then Hong Kong, representatives of Hong Kong, representatives of the Central People's Government had to sit down and turn the joint agreement into a basic law for Hong Kong, the Special Administrative Region, which would embody the terms of the joint declaration. But as lawyers, I think you'd be interested to and reassured to know that the legal system is flourishing in Hong Kong, and I think that our management systems are also flourishing in Hong Kong, and there are about several thousand of our accountants are working every day in the mainland. Our accountant firms, KPMG, Deloitte, and so on, the majority of their staff, of their total staff, are now in the mainland, and our systems of management, control of business, and so on, are spreading into China. Our architects do a tremendous amount of work in China, and our lawyers also are contributing to the development of the legal system in China.
Just on the point you mentioned that the common law system is influencing the Chinese legal system, have you any examples of that?
Well, our lawyers appear in business cases in China, and this is going on every day. Our lawyers are there. But of course we have our own arbitration system in Hong Kong. So business cases involving relations with the mainland can be arbitrated in Hong Kong. So it's quite remarkable, I think, how the two systems really are working together and developing and getting closer, and the differences are gradually being ironed out.
China perhaps moving to a more open-minded approach to legal processes.
Civil society is developing. That's right.
So David,
Okay.
once again, thank you very much for the time you've given to us today, and I wish you all the very best. And enjoy the football. And I assume you'll be able to find a ticket. I'm sure with your influence you'll find someone who will give you a ticket.
My influence will be
On a previous occasion, Julian mentioned that his admission certificate as a solicitor was signed by the redoubtable Lord Denning. Now, Julian, that wasn't the only occasion that you met Lord Denning, was it?
No, I met him in 1971 when I was an undergraduate. First year of my degree, my cousin, who was then on the Law Society Council, I think was much more formal in those days, invited me to a Solicitor's Journal function. I went along in my one and only suit, looking suitably out of place, with the great and the good, ended up in the corner of the room, big hall in fact, with an elderly man with a charming accent who asked me my views on the future of the legal profession. I said, being only about 18, 19 years of age, well, sir, I think that in my lifetime, but not my professional lifetime, solicitors will have the same rights of audience as barristers. Within a few moments of starting the conversation, my cousin came, bowed deeply and said, "Master, may I formally introduce you to Julian Young?" And I realised with horror I think the look of horror must have crossed my face that I had been wittering on to the greatest legal mind of the 20th century, Lord Denning. He just turned round and he said very politely, "Well, Mr. Kissam, Mr. Young and I have been having a fascinating conversation on the future of the legal profession." Whereupon he ignored my cousin, who after all was in a position of some authority on the Law Society Council, and continued his conversation with me, not putting me down, bearing in mind there was a 70-something year gap, 60-something year gap between us, but taking into account all that I'd said, and I wonder what he must have thought. Of course, I was partly right and partly wrong. Yes, solicitors have got high rights of audience, and indeed I hold those high rights in criminal cases. And it was within my professional lifetime as well as within my lifetime itself. So maybe, just for once, just as Lord Denning saw the future from his lofty position, from my then lowly position as an undergraduate, I also saw the future.
Thank you, Julian, for that lovely anecdote.
And it's true.
I would expect nothing less of you, Julian. Oh, you are, after all, an officer of the court.
Of the old Supreme Court. Nobody's too sure actually whether we're still officers of the new Supreme Court in view of their distance from the original system. But I don't know, maybe we still are, maybe we still aren't. But we're trusted by the courts. And that's the main
Turning from Sir David Akers-Jones' vision of Hong Kong in 40 years' time to current day matters. Now, I understand, Julian, that Theresa may be proposing scrapping certain anti-race and sex discrimination laws brought in by the previous Labour government because they're potentially damaging business. Do you have any views about this?
It's an interesting idea. Of course, those laws are entrenched now in employment law in any event. To start tinkering with employment law is going to be very dangerous. It's like tinkering in any other area of the law. It has a knock-on effect, and the system is in a sort of a balance. If you interfere with one part, what effect are you going to have on another part of the system? And the fundamental fairness, which not only people in this country, but outsiders view England. I think the government tampers with what have been treated as fundamental freedoms with great caution. And if it doesn't do so, the effects could be very unfortunate. We have got some rather peculiar laws, some of them, for example, about the time before redundancy payments are made, which have become shorter and shorter, and now has returned to a more sensible period. And at a time when there's a high degree of unemployment, there has to be mobility of the labour force. But to mess about the way in which fairness should be applied to all the people applying for jobs is a step which is an enormous step, and I think Theresa May as Home Secretary should look very long and very hard before she does that.
Well, I have to say, Theresa May is also coming under fire from various campaigners. They're wanting the government to reform the Public Order Act, specifically with regards to banning insulting words or behaviour. And why do you think this is, Julian?
I think that the government wants to change some of those laws because it can be brought into disrepute if, for example, people are telling jokes which are vaguely offensive. Virtually all jokes are vaguely offensive. It's what Rowan Atkinson said when he addressed various parties about the changes in the law which the Labour government was suggesting. And political correctness can be one thing, but you can't have laws that stop people from telling jokes and poking fun. It's not necessarily harmful to poke fun, provided you don't do so in a way which causes genuine distress and upset. Let's take, for example, the conduct of someone who stood for political office who said something which was highly offensive. Of course, I'm speaking of Ken Livingstone. Ken Livingstone told a reporter who was doorstepping him, and he obviously didn't want to be doorstepped, that he was behaving as if he was a concentration camp guard. Now that reporter said to Ken Livingstone, "I find that offensive, I'm Jewish." That, in my opinion, was not only insensitive and insulting, but probably as close to being a criminal offence as possible, because it was, the moment Ken Livingstone knew it was offensive and caused distress and alarm, he should have apologised if he would have forgotten about it. The apology almost certainly would have been accepted, but he couldn't for some reason find it in his heart to accept he'd said something stupid. I suspect he's paid a political price for such insensitivity. Nevertheless, we can't stop people telling jokes. Otherwise, I'm afraid to say, since most jokes are based upon something unfortunate about someone, there won't be very much humour in the world, especially on the stand-up circuit, which both you and I know fairly well.
Yes, we have in the past done stints as stand-up comedians, but we'll talk about that another time. Julian, turning to more serious issues, apparently the government has urged judges to strengthen sentences on the owners of out-of-control dogs. What do you think about that as a dog lover yourself?
Well, will this law come to bite the government on the backside or not? I don't know. There are far more important issues, I'm afraid, than dangerous dogs. And dangerous dogs are a problem, but they're not such a great problem as perhaps matters of principle that should be addressed. Antisocial behaviour orders, which are out of control, can't be policed and seem to be issued by courts too readily. The peculiar laws in relation to the possession of firearms, which means that you can be guilty of the offence of possession of a firearm and serve a minimum of 5 years imprisonment even if you didn't know that what you had in your possession was a firearm. That's against all the principles that I understand of criminal law, and perhaps that is something, since it is a matter of complete and utter principle, that should be addressed by this government before we worry about dangerous dogs. There's enough legislation dealing with animals that are out of control and criminal offences which people commit by having animals out of control, especially dogs. Let's deal with principles first and worry about the individual, relatively minor offences. I say relatively because dogs can kill, unfortunately. Let's deal with the relatively minor matters after we've dealt with the matters of principle.
Now finally, it's that time of the week again. Yes, it's Joke of the Week.
Joke of the week. Right, now, but make sure I get this one right. Do you have trouble getting your lizard up in the mornings? Do you suffer from erectile dysfunction?
Oh, Julian. Well, I think that now brings this particularly special episode of Lawyers with Attitude to an end. And I encourage all of our viewers to send in their comments either by email or text to us.
Or Facebook. I'm on Facebook. I have a face. You can Twitter me. I'm a member of the Twitterati. I am VLWA.
The Lawyer with Attitude. Thank you very much, Julian.
And you, Judy.
Bye.